he knew that it was genuine, that they were looking to reduce or get rid of completely trial by jury, because he'd raised it with his whip and immediately been offered a private meeting with the Prime Minister. Well, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer wouldn't be meeting with backbenchers worried about policies unless they were coming in. He said, I find that if I don't look at the order paper and know what I'm voting for, I can sleep rather better. There's a lot of investigations going all over Europe into people trafficking, and particularly child trafficking. And the evidence is that the two whistleblowers we've got, who were Ukrainian Secret Service agents who blew the whistle on what they were being asked to do in their organisations. One was assassinated with a bomb under the table in a coffee shop, and the other one had a bomb put under his car, and it's pretty compelling. I was told by an American source close to the Trump camp that if the whole of the Epstein files were released, there would be 100 serious politicians left standing in America. In early January 2022, I was offered a bribe of whatever I wanted. I could ask for anything I wanted, as long as I'd shut up and toe the line.
So I hear you've got an event on.
Yes, I have, Will. I've got an event on over 3 days. We've got 3 evenings at the Truman Brewery, Hanbury Street in Spitalfields. An evening with Andrew Bridgen. And don't ask me what I'm going to say yet, because I haven't decided. It's going to be sort of spontaneous. I mean, I even took a phone call in the car on the way down to London today, which will be included now in the briefing I'll be giving before the Q&As and the informal chat.
And so you're dropping some truth bombs, are you?
I'm dropping some truth bombs. I think a lot of the audience will know that they are the truth when the bomb drops. I mean, that's the great thing. It doesn't come as a great surprise.
So last time I saw you, it was outside Westminster Magistrates Court, and you were telling me that they were going to end our juries. A few days ago, it's just been broken that they are having these conversations. Do you want to tell people what's happening with the juries, because you've got insider intel?
Yes. I was briefed by... I'll make a confession. I do actually have a friend who's a Labour MP. We don't agree on politics. I mean, he will maintain that he's a socialist. He's not really. And in his heart of hearts, he actually wants to be a good person. And he's completely disillusioned with what's going on. And he told me 3 or 4 months ago that this was the direction of travel and that he wasn't happy about it.
So how far has this progressed in the Labour Party? Because we've seen a few days ago they put this idea out. A few weeks ago, you were telling me they were having this conversation. You said that he'd been offered a meeting with Starmer.
Yes, he knew that it was genuine, that they were looking to reduce or get rid of completely trial by jury, because he'd raised it with his whip and immediately been offered a private meeting with the Prime Minister. Well, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer wouldn't be meeting with backbenchers worried about policies unless they were coming in.
So this is definitely happening.
Yes, and you know, I think I will tell you a conversation I had with my friend who's a Labour MP, who will remain nameless, and I've known him for now 15 years. I would say he's got a very safe Labour seat. So he's a 5-time returned MP, and I in the phone call conversation for an hour and a half, I said to him, look, you know, for 14 years you were in opposition and you always wanted to be on the government benches. Well, you know, you've had over a year now on the government benches. How do you like it? And he said that I'll be out at the next election. I said, I'm going to lose my seat. He said, we're all going to be out in the Labour Party after 1 year in government. He said a few of the new Labour MPs think that it can be pulled round. He says, but they are deluded. So he said, that's where we are. I said, well, I'm not surprised. You know, look at what you promised and look at what you delivered. You know, you promised that there was going to be £300 off everyone's energy bills before the election, and what did you deliver? You know, you took away the winter fuel allowance for the vast majority of pensioners, and you allowed energy prices to rise by an inflation-busting 9% last October, and they're rising again. I said, so you did that. I said, you've as a socialist, you've cut benefits for the severely disabled. I said, do you think that's going to make them be able to work? And I said, don't tell me that you voted for the appalling decriminalisation of abortion up to birth, a policy which probably, I estimate, not more than 2 or 3% of the general public would support. But it flew through Parliament. And he said, actually, Andrew, he said, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? He said, it's that bad. It's become that bad. He said, I just sit in the tea room, the members' tea room, next door to the chamber. I listen for when the bell rings for a division. I go into the lobbies, see where the Labour whips are, and I walk through as they request me to. He said, I find that if I don't look at the order paper and know what I'm voting for, I can sleep rather better. So a complete abdication of the duties. I said, well, that's not the way democracy has to work. You have to vote without fear or favour on whether it's in the interests of your constituents for every piece of legislation. And he's a 5-term Labour MP. That's the grip that the Whip's office. And I said, well, look, it's what you're doing is not right. If you know you've lost your seat at the next election, why don't you just stand up and tell the truth? What have you got to lose? Then he just said, yeah, I'm not brave enough, Andrew. I'm not like you. I'm not brave enough.
What do they actually have on them, especially the new flock of MPs? Is it the fact that all of them have been on social media, so they've got some old tweets on just about everyone? Everyone's got dirt now these days. You can't... If you were... let's say you were 12 when everything on Facebook started coming in. I mean, they've definitely got some sort of dirt on you, even if it's like in Justin Bieber.
I don't know, but I mean... we know how the Labour Whip's office works. What I will say is there's been a lot of speculation around Nick Brown, the former Labour Chief Whip, who was suspended and didn't stand in the 2024 election. Now it's all coming out about various allegations about what he may have done. Well, the power of the Whip's office is immense, and because the Whip's office know the dirt on every current, past and future probably candidate, that's why Nick Brown can't be held accountable or is being protected by the Labour Party, because he's got the dirt on everybody in the Labour Party, because that's where it's held in the Whip's office. And it's the same in the Conservative Party. And who was it that came out against Rupert Lowe in Reform? It was Lee Anderson, who's the Chief Whip, who's the Whip.
So is this why Gove is so powerful within the Tory party? Because it seems that everyone in the country hates him. I don't know anyone who likes Michael Gove. All the teachers hate him. Just about,
the farmers.
Farmers hate him. Everyone in every industry seems to hate Gove. Everywhere he's been hated. He stabbed Boris Johnson in the back at an early point against Theresa May. And yet he seems to continually fail upwards, and he's now running the Spectator, I believe.
He is running the Spectator, the Gover. Interesting character. Obviously, he was very prominent in Vote Leave, and then he was the cabinet minister that Theresa May put out to make the announcement that, despite 108 times her saying that leave means leave and we're leaving with or without a deal, he was the one that came out and said, no, of course we can't leave without a deal. He is a He was almost uninterrupted, the only Conservative MP that was in the cabinet all the way from 2010 to when we got kicked out of office in 2024. So he's a great survivor, and one thing that will guarantee your political survival is having the goods on a lot of people.
So he's basically got the dirt on everyone.
He'll know. He was in the cabinet for all of those years, confident of all of the prime ministers. He will know where the vast majority of the bodies are buried, won't he?
And he was Chief Whip. So how many MPs, what percentage do they actually have something substantial on? How many of them are cheating on their wives? How many of them, are engaged in some sort of sordid business or corruption or this or that?
Well, if you judge it by the number that were willing, when presented with unequivocal evidence that the vaccines were causing death and injury, the ones that were willing to stand up with me and stop the government from vaccinating young children who are at no risk from COVID whatsoever, never been a death of a healthy child of that age with COVID anywhere in the world. All of them. And I've told you in an interview before that in early January 2022, I was offered a bribe of whatever I wanted. I could ask for anything I wanted as long as I'd shut up and toe the line. How many of them have been made that offer? How many of them have been made that offer since? I mean, once you're in power, I mean, the gift of the government is immense, isn't it? And I think they were pretty shocked when I said, is that the game we're playing then? And they said, that's the game we always play. And I said, well, if that's the game we're playing, then I know what I want. I want the Prime Minister's resignation letter. And they said that was the one thing I couldn't have. So I said, well, I don't want anything else. If that's the game we're playing, do I? But I mean, not many people would have done that, I don't think. I think they were pretty surprised.
Well, how much power do the MPs actually have? And how much is just controlled through Cabinet, which is essentially controlled by the Prime Minister, who seems controlled by outside forces? We've all seen Cummings speaking.
Absolutely. And I think the public perception is that they think MPs have got a lot more power than they've got. And I'm afraid that Prime Ministers and the Cabinet have got all the power. But it's exerted through the whips. And that is the corruption of our politics. If you corrupt the party system, once you've got the partying, because it doesn't take long in politics to realise that the way to get on in politics is to do what's right or in the interests of the party you represent, which is very seldom in the interests of the people you're supposed to represent. That's why the parties really don't they prefer to have candidates parachuted in from outside. They don't want loyalty to the constituents. I was brought up in the area that I represented. That's what I wanted to do. I lived there before the election and I had my business there. They don't want those local links because there's got to be the loyalty is rewarded for loyalty to the party.
And how many other influences are there? Because we've seen everything come out recently, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, about the influence of Israel in America, AIPAC. How much influence does Israel have in controlling our politicians? Because to my understanding...
Massive. I had a run-in with the pro-Israeli lobby probably about 8 or 9 years ago. I'd have to go back and look in Hansard, and it was something about the situation in the Middle East, and I'm merely stating in the chamber that there was a huge pro-Israeli lobby in our parliament, and that given the UK's situation, that we needed to be in a position where we could be a good, but at times critical friend to Israel. And that pro-Israeli lobby were basically trying to get me kicked out of the Conservative Party for saying that. I had meetings with them, with a guy who's now in the House of Lords who was leading that lobby, and he said, look, you'll have to retract everything you've said. And I said, I said it without fear or favour. You can't make me retract something. I said in the chamber of the House of Commons, which I believe to be true. He said, oh, we can, he said. He said that David Cameron, quite early in his career, said that Gaza was an open prison camp, and we made him retract it, and he's the Prime Minister. And that was the way they talked to you. That was the way I said, well, suit yourself. I said, but I'm not retracting what I've said. It's on the record, and it's staying on the record.
And you said good but critical friend.
Yes. That was too much. Well, you can someone can go and Google it, get it from Hansard.
Well, you see organisations like the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism.
But at times, critical friend.
The Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. How much are they part of this grouping? What role do they play? And do they have funding from Israel? Because it's Gideon Falter who runs that, and they just seem to have such connections with the MPs and also the police, the lawyers. They hunt down people, and then they prosecute people in this country, British people, British citizens, for speaking.
I've anti-Semitism myself, haven't I? For retweeting a paper from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And the words of an eminent world-regarded cardiologist who told me that the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine was the biggest crime against humanity since the Holocaust. And since is a very interesting word, which has led to a massive court case against Matt Hancock, who was aided and abetted by Rishi Sunak, a man who we now know, or most of the public probably don't know, a man who acquired 11% of the shares in Moderna in 2016 for $500 million and put those shares into an offshore trust called Theleme Partners, which he co-founded, which is based in the Cayman Islands for tax purposes. And of course they had their little vignette of deceit in the chamber of the House of Commons at PMQs, where they didn't name me, but and then Hancock, obviously, that's all under privilege, parliamentary privilege, but Hancock then reproduced it in a tweet, which has now had 4.4 million views and led to a court case. But I mean, 3 years on, it's on the 11th of January after Christmas. That'll be 3 years since that court case started, and we're getting nowhere because Hancock's got so much money behind him. I'm not really taking on Matt Hancock. This is me taking on Big Pharma.
And they're now on their third motion to strike out, I believe, because I bumped into a lawyer the other day. I wanted to check with him whether it was normal. So I said, so if there's a third motion to strike out a court case, would that be normal, or would that be almost clearly abusive process? And he just looked at me, the strangest look, and went, well, that would definitely lean towards abusive process. That's not normal at all.
Well, that's what we've done for 3 years. He's just kept trying to strike out my claim. Hancock has not actually produced a defence in 3 years. We don't think he's got one. We think he's actually abusing the defamation law because he's never made, he didn't, when he had the opportunity, put a defence in of truth. So he's not, his claim is not that he's telling the truth when he said I was anti-Semitic and what I'd said was anti-Semitic, anti-scientific, no place in society, in Parliament or wider society for someone with those views.
Oh, we see what
vaccines are hurting people.
Well, we see what they've done to Charlie Kirk after label.
Yes. Well, I mean, so he hasn't got a defence of truth, but what he's trying to do is have is claim that it, in his legal papers, that I haven't claimed it's truth, but if I had it done, I would have won. And you can't do that in defamation law. If you don't go for a defence of truth and win it, then it has to be treated that what you said is falsity. And that is a rule of defamation law as old as Westminster Hall, is the quote. And his own barrister, who mysteriously is Aidan Eardley, KC, a man who the High Court thought it was reasonable during this 3-year litigation on defamation to promote him to a part-time judge on the same bench as the judges who are sitting in judgment of this case, which I think is dubious. And he's also the barrister that the Attorney General keeps using to put Tommy Robinson into prison. Same barrister. It's a small world, isn't it?
Interesting.
And he wrote a book about defamation law, which I just happened to have a copy, and I've been quite interested over the last few years. And he points out that, if you don't put in a defence of truth, you have to your evidence has to, what you've said at the time has to be treated as falsity by the court. And that's a rule. But I mean, he's trying not to do that, and that's why he hasn't got a defence. That's why he's going for strikeouts, and they're very, very expensive. Probably the appeal we're going to have to deal with probably in February now, which is nearly a year after he filed for it, with all the toing and froing. It's probably going to be more expensive than going to final hearing. If he was confident that he's innocent of my claims against him for defamation, why wouldn't he want to clear his name in a hearing? I put it to you that there's no way that Matt Hancock wants to be in a court of law under oath answering questions put to him by my barrister about his conduct during the pandemic or anything else.
And he would have to come into court, and that would be the exposure.
That's why he's never, ever, actually, in 3 years, he's never signed up his witness statements. He's had his barristers, his legal team do it for him, present statements, but because he hasn't signed one himself, I've done 3, because you can't be cross-examined on anything if you haven't put a witness statement in. There's nothing to cross-examine him on because he's not on oath saying anything.
Speaking of court cases, you're going to be down at the Derek Dimmock case coming up with Midazolam.
I'm in London now. I'm tonight, Friday night, Spitalfield speaking, Saturday night, Sunday evening. I hope to see you all there. And then Monday is this is the 3rd sitting of a week for a case that was originally listed for 4 days back in April. And it's interesting. I'm going to put out, probably tomorrow, the letter that I wrote. Paul Dimmock, that's Derek Dimmock, who passed away, his son, approached me in early 2023. It may have even been 2022, and asked me if I'd help him. His own MP for the Southwark area wouldn't help, and he explained the situation about how he believed his father had been murdered or euthanised through the misuse of midazolam and morphine. I was already working on NG 163, which was the protocol that Matt Hancock brought in on the 4th of April 2020 as a treatment for vulnerable elderly who couldn't be put on ventilators. And that's, that was a great, so no early intervention on people who thought they'd got COVID, stay at home until your lips go blue, come into hospital. If you're fairly healthy, we're going to put you on a ventilator, and that's going to have an 85% chance of death. That was the outcome. Or if you're vulnerable elderly and you're not strong enough to go on a ventilator, we're going to give you midazolam and morphine, which will restrict your respiratory system even further, and you're going to die. And there was 100% death from that treatment. And he said, look, I want to get an inquest into this, and we've had some hearings, but it's not going anywhere. And so I wrote to the coroner in question in Southwark. I think from memory was a guy called Andrew Harris, and I pointed out merely in the letter that this could be the failings of a NHS protocol that led to a death, and part of a coroner's job is to do investigations promptly where there is a risk that not doing so could allow something to carry on being done which was going to cause future deaths. And
prevention of future deaths. It's part of, I saw this in the case.
That's the point of having an inquest. How did this death happen? Was it a failing of a system or a person or whatever, or a protocol? And identifying that could stop future deaths. And I said it's really important because that's the crux of this, because I believe it's still going on now. And I also, out of courtesy, CC'd in the Chief Coroner for England. Now, the coroner in Southwark then approved the Derek Dimmock case for an inquest, and then mysteriously had to retire very quickly. And God bless him, the Chief Coroner for England, who I'd only CC'd in for courtesy, wrote to parliamentary standards and tried to get me kicked out of Parliament for influencing a judge. I got the impression the establishment didn't want an inquest into the Derek Dimmock case. We've now got this coroner, Morris, who's a former doctor, I believe, and the former coroner for Southwark, who approved it for an inquest, did say we need someone with a lot of medical experience and knowledge to take this case forward. It is very, very important. But it started out as a 4-day hearing, which overran. Then we had a week, which overran in the summer. And now we've got another week to try and get through all the witnesses. And it starts on Monday at Southwark Coroner's Court, a building I've become quite familiar with. And, I think, this is a totemic case. The evidence, the expert evidence, is going to be very, very interesting for the public. And of course, it's not being reported in our mainstream media. Apart from the Conservative Woman, there's almost no coverage of this issue, which I honestly believe affected tens of thousands of vulnerable elderly who were moved out of hospital to make way for the first wave of COVID patients who never appeared. And they were sent to care homes and nursing homes without their medications, and what they were sent with was midazolam and morphine. Why would you give a respiratory suppressant to patients who are supposedly suffering from a respiratory virus? And of course, what we do know as well, and very few of the public will be aware of this, is that the average time from diagnosis with COVID-19 to death was 18.3 days in the UK. What I can tell you is, and this is a scientific fact, that viral infections burn out after 7 days, so they didn't die of COVID-19. I believe what they died of, either on the ventilators or was probably bacterial pneumonia. They weren't prescribed antibiotics, which would have saved their lives. But what they didn't die of was COVID-19.
Yeah, Claire Craig told me about this. They weren't giving out the antibiotics that people needed.
The normal protocols you'd give for people who'd suffered from a viral illness. Yeah, they weren't. Anyone would have thought that, if you wanted to be cynical, you'd think that they wanted the outcomes that they got, which was huge rise in deaths, which obviously then encouraged people to take the vaccines.
Speaking of the so-called vaccines, what is the situation now, and what are their plans going forward? I know that obviously there's the whole digital ID thing, which we've all been warning about for quite a while. So where's this going? What is their strategy going ahead, knowing people that you know?
I had hoped that Robert Kennedy Jr. and his team would have done more faster. I'm still thinking it's all going to come out. They're trying to deal with the childhood vaccine schedule first. I think they're clearly being restricted, and I've no doubt that the whole of National Institute for Health in America and the Centre for Disease Control, those organisations, those regulators in America, health regulators, they were completely infested by big pharma supporters. A revolving door, just like in the UK, between the regulators and the industry. And of course, the industry are paying a lot more money than their roles they would have got in the regulators. 86% of the Medicines and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency's funding in the UK comes from Big Pharma, and the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation in the UK, which advises the government on vaccines and vaccine strategy. In their declarations of interest, the members of that committee advising the government had to declare £1 billion of shares that they own between them in Big Pharma. So, these are not independent regulators. They're very much partisan, and it's been this way. And Kennedy and his team and Jay Bhattacharya, they've taken over Anthony Fauci's job. They've had to sort out those organisations. They're still moving their people in, which is a good sign, into those organisations. The Vaccine Approvals Committee in America, Kennedy had to sack the whole lot of them, because he said there's no vaccines going to be approved unless they've done double-blind placebo trials. And then what did they do? They approved another mRNA vaccine against his orders, and he had to remove the whole, 17 people off the committee and constitute a new committee. Well, there are some good people on that committee now. I think people like Dr. Robert Malone and others.
But where is it going? What's the next stage of their plan? Digital ID, so they can track everything, and then what? And then what? And mass migration.
I think the digital ID is being reported, is being inflicted upon people again around the world at the same time. So you've got governments from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, who are in lockstep. Well, recently historically, whenever our governments are in lockstep around the world with a policy, it's never good for the people, is it? We saw that during COVID and the lockdowns, and mandates, masking, social distancing. We're seeing it again with the digital ID. And the fact is, I think they know that our governments know so many people have woken up. They're monitoring social media all the time. They know exactly what the temperature is amongst the public on various issues. And this is their chance to assert control, bring in digital ID, and then I think we're in a situation which is the most nightmare situation. I mean, let's just go back. I always thought that when more than 50% of the public in the UK realised there was something seriously wrong with the COVID-19 vaccines, that it'd have to stop. Well, it's a lot more than that now, and it hasn't stopped, has it? And with digital ID and people censoring themselves because the power that the state will have to take retribution against you, financially, socially, if you go against the narrative, merely the fact that they have the power to do that inhibits people from actually speaking out, and they've already won. And we end up, if we're not careful, in a situation like the old Soviet Union, where the Politburo will make their announcements, tractor production's up, so that means more food next year, but they say that every year and there never is, and everyone knows it's a lie, but what can you do about it? Because they've got huge power over you, and so they can make these pronouncements which are not true, and the people know it's not true, but they're still the people in power. And that's where we are in this country. And I think if they bring in digital ID, and I've said it from a long, long time ago, and don't think this is a Labour plan, all the consultation was done under the Conservative government on this. That's what first made me aware of what the plans were. And it is a baton handover at the last election, the Uni Party. If we say yes to digital ID, you'll probably never be able to say no to the government ever again, anything the government wants, because that's the plan. And you'll be giving away not only your freedom, but you're giving away your neighbour's freedom by inference, but you'll be giving away your children's and your grandchildren's freedoms, and you'll be giving away the freedoms of generations of our nation yet unborn, because this is a one-way street. And people say, well, they always get legislation through the House of Commons by people believing that we have a benign government. And of course, the legislation is always written loose enough that yes, a malevolent government could implement it that way. I don't think there's any legislation where the government doesn't exploit it to the most of its powers. So whatever the worst case scenario is, that's where the government will take any piece of legislation to, ultimately, when it has to. And where it can take digital ID to, it's very clear from what we hear, pronouncements from the World Economic Forum, the United Nations. They've decided that the social model they want for the world, including the so-called developed or free world, is the Chinese social credit scoring system. What they haven't done is ever put it to the people in a vote, because they wouldn't get it through, so they just bring it in through the back door. And all of Agenda 2030, very little of it can be implemented without digital ID. That's the cornerstone. So digital ID is a hill we need to be willing to die on. And it's one of the two existential threats, I think, facing us now. There's that, and the other thing is we've got to resist being dragged into a major war in Europe. Either of those things currently. They know the truth's coming out about the vaccines. They know the truth's coming out about the net zero hoax. And they need digital ID, the war. If they can get us into the war, they can bring the digital ID in much easier, because we normally would have an ID card during a major war. Starmer is gagging to enforce Tony Blair's Civil Contingencies Act, I think 2004, which gives the government basically martial law's powers, power of detention.
Indefinite?
We'll basically be in a situation of martial law. They can take anybody's property off them. They can, they'll have secret courts. It's massive. It's never been used. It's sitting there. They would probably enact it if we had civil disorder. I mean, that is maybe they're pushing us to civil disorder to be able to enact those powers. And then we are into potentially the civil war that many people, commentators, have predicted.
Well, do you think civil war's likely? I mean, I was looking at the maths of it, and I think we've got over 10 million migrants in this country. I believe it's something moving towards 20% of the population here.
Well, since COVID, if we hadn't had uncontrolled migration, there'd be less people. We've had more deaths than we've had live births from the indigenous population. I mean, you'd have empty houses on streets. Obviously, because we've got uncontrolled migration, those excess deaths are being masked all the time. I don't know if you saw what I posted a few days ago. The most vaccinated place in the world was Waterford in Ireland. 99.7% of the population had at least 2 jabs. And so they all complied. After the jabs, they had the highest rate of COVID in Ireland. And then they had the highest rate of excess deaths in Ireland, 45% excess deaths. And amazingly, the World Health Organization last week just gave the local council and health board an award for their efforts of getting so many people vaccinated. Now, the mainstream media can't deal with those facts, yeah? So they just don't report it. But they did report that they'd won an award from the WHO for their efforts in keeping everyone safe and healthy.
I bumped into Jacob Rees-Mogg, I believe it was 2 days ago, and he turned around to me and said with full seriousness that he believed that the jab was no more harmful than a paracetamol. And I tried asking him whether he'd look at Heart Group and Dr. Claire Craig, and he did that sort of usual slimy thing where he just look at everything.
Well, that's interesting because, I think Jacob knows everything. He should know, but his own sister, Annunciata, had to go into hospital with chest pains after 2 Pfizer jabs.
So his sister was injured, and yet he turned around to me and says it's no worse than the paracetamol 2 days ago.
Jacob's a proper politician.
So, I mean, rounding back to where we began, talking about what they've got on them. What is the influence of Mossad, and what is the influence of this Epstein business as well in terms of our politicians over here?
Well, I think as far as Secret Service agencies go, I don't think you wouldn't be able to get a fag paper between Mossad, the CIA, and MI6. I think they're all working together. I think they just allocate the jobs on who's got the most assets in that area to do what the common purpose is. I was told by an American source close to the Trump camp that if the whole of the Epstein files were released, there wouldn't be 100 serious politicians left standing in America. I think it's all going to be redacted. I was also told that there was over 300 UK passport holders that travelled to Epstein's Island. 300. And obviously there were other properties that Epstein had which were fitted with film cameras for the compromat, and that was the largest house in New York, and also he had a ranch, didn't he? I think it's going to run to a whole generation of politicians have been compromised. And it's almost as if it was a rite of passage. Until they'd got the compromat on you, couldn't be allowed to get to high office, because otherwise they couldn't control you. It's a complete control system, which is why we're seeing governments in lockstep on very strange issues around the world.
Is that why? Or are they?
Schwab say? He said he had penetrated the cabinets of the world.
So
I didn't want to be penetrated by Klaus Schwab, I can assure you. That's why I didn't go to Davos when they invited me.
So are they still running operation like these, like with Epstein in this country, or even overseas, and taking people out overseas in order to keep this level of control over politicians and other businessmen, influential people?
I think they've got the people they've got. I mean, there will be successor organisations, but they've got the people they've got. I mean, if we could if it was all exposed, it would just take down a whole generation of politicians around the world. And when the Americans said to me we wouldn't have 100 serious politicians left in America if it all came out, I said, well, you don't want the ones that are compromised, do you? But I mean, if you think that if Trump's organisation they know what's out there, I mean, who's to say they're not currently blackmailing those politicians, whichever party they're in, on the release of the data? But I think it'll all be heavily redacted. Whether Trump's involved or not, I mean, he certainly was known to Jeffrey Epstein. He knew some of the stuff that was going on. We'll have to see. But I mean, it's amazing how information can be manipulated one way or another to implicate. I mean, our mainstream media, I think it was Malcolm X that said, the people with the most power in the world are the mainstream media because they have the power to make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent. And they do, don't they? They do.
1 second. So when we spoke a while back, you also talked about the child trafficking. Can you give us a brief update on that as well?
Well, yes. Well, obviously, when you interviewed me in June 2024, a long time ago now, I exposed the work we'd done investigating child trafficking between the Ukraine and the UK for the elite paedophile rings. What I can tell you from that is that we've received information that as a result of that expose, which also was thankfully helped by Urban Scoop and the documentary The Child Traffickers, that they've moved the control of that operation out of the UK. It's now being conducted out of Belgium, and we're still after them.
So how widespread is this? Because you said it was influential people who were involved with it. They've moved to Belgium. I would suppose that's because that's the base of the EU. It
is, and they obviously feel safer there. I think it was again a good thing that Trump did was shutting down the USAID organisation, which was brought in by Biden. I'm absolutely convinced that was funding child trafficking around the world. That was it. And when you've got things like Robert Kennedy, the first meeting after they took over power this year, saying to President Trump, I need to make a statement that Health and Human Services, the organisation that President Trump had put Robert Kennedy Jr. in charge of, when he says that it was the major conduit for child trafficking into the United States, and I've stopped it. And the fact that he said that and it wasn't reported on any mainstream media in the UK, I think that tells you all you need to know. Of course, it's going on in the UK as well.
On what scale is it still happening here?
It's endemic, absolutely endemic. The number of children that disappear in the world is it's running to millions and millions and millions every year. Probably 8 million a year children disappear in the world. That's more than the population of Austria.
How many of them are coming to our shores?
I don't know, but it's many, 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 many thousands, hundreds of thousands. And there'll be more information coming out on this. There's a lot of investigations going all over Europe into people trafficking and in particular child trafficking. There's more money in it than there is in drugs.
And you say they're trafficking these girls. Can I ask as to...
And boys.
Can I ask as to the credibility of the evidence on this?
Well, the credibility of the evidence. The evidence is that the two whistleblowers we got, who were Ukrainian Secret Service agents who blew the whistle on what they were being asked to do in their organisations, one was assassinated with a bomb under the table in a coffee shop, and the other one had a bomb put under his car. I mean, it's pretty compelling.
And now it's in Belgium as well.
It was always in Belgium. Belgium is a hotspot of child trafficking, but they've relocated the administration of the UK of the Ukraine to UK trafficking to Belgium because of the heat we've put on them.
And so you've put this heat on publicly. Also, privately, I know you've been trying to investigate this. Have you been working with police, and what happens when you try working with police on this?
When you work with the police on this, I was picked up and accused of paedophilia myself. 2 weeks after the film went out that we produced that interview, and they made crazy allegations that I was a member of the Freemasons and had partaken in ritualised child abuse at Freemasons meetings. Well, any sort of investigation would have found out that I've never been a member of the Freemasons and never been to a lodge meeting ever in my life. And of course, they had to drop it after a few months due to evidential problems, I was told by the Chief Constable, because there was no evidence. But of course, that's the warning shot. It wasn't by accident. They didn't want me to go there.
And usually they'd accuse you of the things that they do themselves.
Yes, of course. And you know, say they could have easily done an investigation without pulling me in for interview under caution and costing me money with lawyers to establish that I'd never been a member of the Freemasons. Despite the 3 times that I think 3 times they asked me.
So do you think this is the Freemasons who are doing this, or some of it? Is it Freemasons abusing children?
Well, the police, Leicestershire Police, seem to think so. And when they accused me of being a Freemason, I did point out in the interview, no, I leave that to you. You're the people who are in the Freemasons, aren't you? They're all lodged up.
And how much influence do the Freemasons have in this country?
Well, I think it's one of many organisations which feed information in and move it. It's a hierarchical organisation. You know, the Fabians, you know, there's another organisation which has got a lot of power in the UK now. You know, it works through those sort of clubs and organisations where power is exerted and control.
How many MPs?
I don't know, because I was never in that clique. But I mean, there's some very prominent MPs that I know that were Freemasons. I mean, I was a man who was of particular interest in his activities that I did a lot of investigation in for 9 years until he was forced out of Parliament, was Keith Vaz. Well, I believe that he was a very, very prominent Freemason.
We did an interview a while back, and you told me about the jabs, and everyone's been poking me, say, which jabs did he get, so he can clarify for the record. So do you want to clarify for the record which jabs you had and what happened there?
2 AstraZeneca. I took them both at Mason's Chemist on Beaver Road in Colville, the same one that my constituents took. I'm hoping. They were the 2 biggest mistakes I made in my life, probably. And you're talking about someone who's been married and divorced twice, but they were bigger mistakes. I think they withdrew the adenovirus vector DNA model of vaccines. So that's the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson, or the Janssen vaccines. I don't think they withdrew them because they were killing too many people. Let's put it that way. I think that they did that. Those vaccines did not contain the lipid nanoparticles, which are so harmful, and I think the worst vaccines were the mRNA, and they're the ones that were pushed out and said that were the most safe and the most effective. Well, we know none of them were effective. And even if they were safe, who'd want to take an experimental vaccine which was not effective? So it's there's a lot of truth to come out there. But when I saw Albert Bourla of Pfizer in the Oval Office being feted as a great guy by President Trump, and you know, I'd love to believe, you know, that Trump has this strategy of, you know, pushing people into the limelight to expose them for what they are. I saw the look on Robert Kennedy Jr.'s face, and he didn't look. He looked very pained. People like Robert Kennedy Jr., we've got the tapes. He's given all the interviews before he was in position of running Health and Human Services. We know what he thinks. He's written the books. We need him to get on and get this sorted, get the truth out there, because it's the only chance that we've got in the world of getting to the truth. in any meaningful time. Because remember, before they expelled me from the Conservative Party, they told me that they wanted to cover up the vaccine harms and excess deaths for 20 years. That is still what they're aiming for. So that there's no one can be held to account, everyone's gone and it's all happened. And if we let that happen, I just worry, what in that 20 years, what else will they have inflicted on humanity? They've got to be held to account. We do need Nuremberg too. And Kennedy and his team are the best chance we've got. And the sooner they get that evidence out there, the safer they are as well. That's what we need.
Right, yeah. So, Andrew, where's your event? It's running 3 days. This should be going out today, so it'll be tonight, tomorrow night, and the night after.
So, yes, tonight, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. It's at the Truman Brewery. And it feels like we're in the Truman Show at times, doesn't it? The Truman Brewery, Hanley Street, in Spitalfields. Come along and we'll have a great evening.
And in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night.
Thanks, Will. Thank you.